Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Who is Harrison Sawyer?
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of a number of novels and nonfiction books.
I'm Molly Jo Riley, producer of the podcast, author of the Unemployment Cookbook and the upcoming mystery novel, NOLA.
And I'm sure you are all joining us after you've voted, so hip hip hooray. It is voting night, and I'm sure election night. I'm sure you guys all have the televisions on in your background watching the election news furiously, trying to figure out who our next president is going to be. It's all very exciting, but might be good to take a break from that. I don't know if you're like me, but I'm pretty much ready for a break from all the election stuff. So that's what we're bringing you tonight. A reminder to those of you listening to the audio only, you can watch us live on YouTube or at aarongansky.com. We record Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can also find us on YouTube. If you're there at YouTube, go ahead and hit the thumbs up button, give us a like and subscribe. It really helps us out quite a bit. So thank you to those of you who have done that. And lastly, if you're watching live on the chat room, you've got several options to share this podcast with your social media crew. And if you would just click on the links at the top of the chat room, that would also help us out quite a bit. So am I getting any better at that intro, or am I just kind of stagnant with it?
You're actually doing much better than you used to. Less prodding from the rest of us. But you did leave one thing out for today, and that is that it is your birthday.
I knew I forgot something.
Happy birthday, Aaron.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, it is my birthday, and I get the worst present ever, which isn't another president. So I'm sorry. I'm a little jaded. I'm not happy with either choice. So anyhow, that's politics. We probably shouldn't talk politics on this show. It's not a political cast, is it?
No. Well, it could be. But,
yeah, very quickly. This is not Facebook. We should leave that alone, huh?
Yeah. Moving on.
So moving on. Well. Our Ask the Author question comes from Jenny Snow tonight. She says, is there any rule about how often to use the character's name versus he or she, the pronouns there? For example, A, Sarah dashed a note to her husband, or B, she dashed a note to her husband. We just get like the greatest questions. A lot of minutia here. This seems like a very specific targeted question. And I'm not sure that there necessarily is a rule. I don't think you're going to find a book that really talks about this. The general rule you'll hear is, oh, don't overuse the name. Use he and she to kind of, change the pace up a little bit. But that can become somewhat cumbersome. I mean, for the most part, your pronouns are going to be fine. They're all well and good, probably preferable in most situations. So that you're avoiding the redundancy of the name. However, if you are speaking of, if you have multiple characters on the scene at the same time of the same gender, it can become confusing. Okay, if we know whose point of view it's in, the pronoun should be fine. But if you've got two of the same gender speaking, then she said, so suddenly becomes confusing, right? She gave her oatmeal when she was done eating. Well, which she are we talking about here? So we're going to have to throw in a name there. And that's fine, just to differentiate between the two. I notice a lot of times in my editings, my editors will go through and one of the most common things that they'll change is they'll change one pronoun to a proper noun for the sake of clarity. If you haven't used the name in a while, you may want to revisit it. And then I would say if you're beginning a new chapter or scene, that you'll want to begin with the proper name, because it will remind the readers whose point of view this scene will be in. And that's really crucial information. I once read a book, I won't say who it's by, but it's by a very famous author who has won all sorts of awards, more awards than I will ever win in my life.
Wow.
And I could not understand this book for the life of me, because she refused to use any sort of proper names, and it was all told from the point of view of 3 or 4 different women, and it was always she and her and hers, and I didn't know whose point of view we were in from chapter to chapter, scene to scene, and I couldn't make heads or tails out of this. It was just, it was a bit of a train wreck, actually. So for me, I like to orient the reader by letting them know early on in the scene or the chapter whose point of view you're in, especially if you're dealing with multiple point of views in third person omniscient. That's going to be super valuable. If you're only working in first person, of course, that would be a whole other set of recommendations or guidelines or rules. Pop, how do you handle this?
Well, I think you're right about everything you said there. The short answer is no, there is no rule. If there is a rule, it is simply this: be clear. Don't forget your readers. We always harp on that. Always remember your readers. So if it's unclear to your reader, then they get knocked out of the story. But also one of the things that'll kill a story, especially the prose, is a lot of repetition of the same thing over and over. I realized this once in a book, and I had used, I think the word I, that wasn't the word I think it was the name, and I think I began 5 paragraphs in a row with the person's name, and I didn't realize it. And then when I was going over the editorial stuff, the editors didn't catch it either, but then I could see it on the page. And I went back and changed that, and my joke was, I got a deal at Costco for the use of that name. So really the thing to do is kind of break it up, change it, just like you change lengths of sentences to make the reading easier and more memorable, to convey more information. You do the same thing with the person. So like you say, early on in the scene, you want to make sure, like you're setting the physical scene, you set the character scene. So who's there, and so the name appears. Just be consistent in the name, and then you go to personal pronouns unless it gets confusing. Sometimes you can fix that by using beats. You mentioned oatmeal. So if we have two women having breakfast, say, and one is eating oatmeal, Julie's eating oatmeal, and Laura's eating only toast, you could have somebody say something, and she stirs the contents of her bowl. So that tells us who it is. It's the one eating the oatmeal. So you can use beats that way. So you can be creative with it, but there is no rule. And other than be clear and don't get so complicated that you lose your reader.
How about you, Molly?
Those are both. Yes, good advice, gentlemen. My rule of thumb is to mention the character by name once every 2 or 3 paragraphs. During dialogue, it's rarely necessary, as we don't call each other by name in every sentence. I use proper names when I need to identify a character, but typically I use about pronouns 75% of the time.
A rough estimation, or did you actually go through and count? I'm curious now.
That actually sounds like something I would do, but no, I've been a little too busy. However, when I have free time next week, I'm going to go through and just see how many times.
Take a sample chapter, yeah.
I'll let you know.
Yeah, that'd be great. So you mentioned something really important, Molly, and I kind of wish that I had actually been bright enough to touch on it. But like you say, during dialogue, one of the rules of dialogue, and we've talked about this before, is try and minimize the use of proper nouns and proper names in dialogue, especially when you only have 2 people in the room. Hey, Billy, how are you doing? Sam asked. I'm well, Sam. Thank you for asking, Billy said. It seems stiff and awkward. We know who they're speaking to. And so you can eliminate proper names there. So proper nouns there. So good point. Thank you.
Usually the difficulty is when you have a bunch of people, like a team or something. So you got 6 people in a room talking, then it gets really difficult. And if they're all the same gender, it's really difficult. But there's other things you can do to make sure that it's clear. But it does take some practice.
I like what you said, Al, about if one has oatmeal and one has toast, you don't have to use their names. You can just use an action or a symbol. And that's what I do a lot with my characters is one wears jewelry, one doesn't. So one will twist her bracelets or the other will twirl her hair, and you just automatically know who is speaking.
Right. There's lots of little things you can do like that. That's really part of the creativity of writing, is being able to tell the story without being redundant, without bogging down, without putting speed bumps in. Mm-hmm. That's really some of the things you do in the rewrite. That's one reason we rewrite. Whether you're doing it as you go along or you get to the end and start over and go through it, rewriting helps you see those. And one of the ways you can discover these things is learn to let your computer read to you. I do that a lot because I will hear it before I will see it. Mm-hmm. Because when I'm writing, I'm seeing the words all the time, but I'm not always recognizing them. I'm seeing what's in my brain. But when I listen to it, I can really recognize it. And that's probably the only other thing I would add is sometimes books go to audio. And if you use the personal names too much, it's really noticeable and audible.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You both bring up some really good points, Pops, especially with that idea of multiple people in a room. Yeah, I do this all the time. Let's say you're hosting a podcast maybe, and you've got two co-hosts, and so you say things like, Molly, what did you think of this? Or, hey, Pops, what is your idea on this? I'm just shooting from the top of my head here. I'm mixing my metaphors apparently as well. So
Notice.
fun things, but yeah, very, very good points, all involved. Thank you for that. Molly, you were going to mention something before we got rolling here.
Was I? Yes.
It's in the show notes. So
Let me see. Oh, yes. I was going over the show notes. I wanted to mention that although our podcasts are mostly standalone episodes, I definitely recommend for our audience to watch or listen to all of the November episodes on proposals, because the information shared here builds and connects and gives a complete picture, one piece at a time. So think of these episodes as Legos. You can build whatever you want with them, but it's better when you have more pieces.
oh, look, see,
I
you're
like
not mixing your
Legos.
analogies.
No, but if it's food or Legos or coffee, I will find a way to work it in.
There's got to be a way to make a coffee cup
out of Legos. I'm formulating that as we speak.
Excellent. All right. Well, I expect a full report next week, as well as
Super
the
glue.
final count. I also want the final count and percentages of your proper nouns to your pronouns. So,
Yes, sir.
homework.
Wow, you're getting a little bossy here. Al, help me out.
No.
It's the teacher in me. It's the teacher in me.
I'm just trying to get rid of the image of you putting Legos in food. But
Not in food, using them to serve the food. See, now I accept the challenge of building a coffee mug out of Legos. You guys are done for. Next week or the week after, super glue, Legos, me, coffee. There we go.
How about proposals?
And proposals.
Is that your modest proposal?
Yeah, it's my modest proposal that we talk about proposals.
Let's go.
All right. Moving on. Well, Pops, this is really, I've done several proposals. You've done more. And so you're our resident expert here. Not only have you written several, but you've also looked at several, I'm assuming, yes? In your years of all your writing and editing and all that kind of stuff, you've looked at several proposals?
Occasionally somebody will contact me and ask me to read their proposal and tell them why it's not getting any traction. Recently had an agent do that for one of her clients, and then I make suggestions. Let me say this, listening to too many politicians, let me say this about that. I know very few writers who enjoy doing proposals. I hate proposals. I loathe proposals, but it's part of the business. Whether you're working in CBA, the Christian market, or the ABA, the general market, more and more proposals are just mandatory. And you're going to use a proposal to get an agent. So you really need to know how to do a proposal. They have some real advantages. So it's good to know how to do these. I've done a bunch. I'm one of the few writers that I know that have received rejections, but they praise the proposal. Nice. Which is just, it's really kind of a mixed feeling there. So, now we don't want your book. But it was a really good looking proposal. Well, thanks. Apparently it wasn't good enough. Story stinks, your proposal is great. So it's, just because you write a good proposal doesn't mean it's going to be accepted. But proposals are very important. So let's start off by talking about what the purpose of a proposal, what we do with them. And so for this program, we're focusing on proposals for novels. A proposal for a nonfiction book is different than a proposal for a work of fiction. So we're just going to focus on novels so that we're all clear on that. Proposal is really your first point of contact with an acquisitions editor or with an agent.
I have a question here, Al, in the show notes. When I read this, for our new audience, can you explain how an acquisitions editor is different from the regular editor? Sure.
Acquisition editors, sometimes we call them AC editors. It always reminds me of the Tim Burton movie with Martians invading. Mm-hmm. All I can say is AC. Okay. An AC editor is someone who acquires works. They become your salesperson. So their job is to go through proposals and go through manuscripts, listen to agents, those sorts of things, to come up with something that will fit the publisher's guidelines. Not every publisher is the same. So the publishing house, some will do supernatural suspense, some won't touch it. Some will do horror, others won't touch it. Some will do only romance, others, just don't excel at romance, so they do something else. Those are things you have to learn. But anyway, an acquisitions editor's primary job is to get through that stuff, find something that he or she can sell, and then what that person will do is they will take it to a publication board, which we'll talk about in a minute. So in publishing, there are different types of editors. There's an acquisitions editor. That's really going to be your first person. It is often the acquisitions editor that will go over the full manuscript and do what's sometimes called a macro edit or a substantive edit. Not a substantial edit, a substantive edit, where they're looking at just the big concepts. Then there are line editors, and they're the ones that fix up the lines and make sure everything makes sense and that it's uniform from beginning to end. Then there are copy editors, and those, it's a special kind of genius to be able. These are the people who know what to do with semicolons and what matches their style. Usage and grammar is not as universal as people think, and it will vary from house to house. So those are the people who go through and make those changes. For example, do you capitalize personal pronouns of deity? So you talk about God. God is in his heaven. Do you capitalize his or not? Well, depends on the publisher. Some do, some don't. Should you use a serial comma or not? Well, it'll vary from house to house. So they're the ones that will conform your work to that. You don't have to worry about the copy editors too much. You just have to go through the stuff they do and check and make sure they haven't messed things up. They usually don't. It's usually the writer that messes it up. So what a proposal then is, it's your salesperson. It's
Nice.
It'll go to the agent. The agent will use it to, usually you'll start with a query letter with them, and then the agent will look at it and see whether or not it's something they want to represent. If you're able to get your proposal to an editor, they will do the same thing. Does this fit our publishing needs? Does it match what we do? Is there evidence here of creativity? Do they know how to write? It's all of those things put together, so it becomes your salesperson, either for your agent or for an editor.
Yeah, you make a good point, Pops. This is really, you might be doing this process to get an agent. If you have an agent, you're doing this process to find the editor. And in your agent, my agent at least, Dave, is, I'm not sure if he's in the chat room or not, but he's kind enough to actually look over my proposals before I send them out. And I've heard from several, editors, agents, etc. They sing high praises about the proposals that I put together. And there's a good reason for that. Because I stole your format, Pops, and so whatever praise is due me is actually due you. So the proposal does a lot of that, and it is a pain, and I've had to make some adjustments from the format that you've showed me to match what some of the publishers have looked for and what some of my agents have looked for, etc. But I think your current proposals kind of match very closely to what I do, specifically in the marketing, I think is where the big differences were, the marketing outlook of that, but we're going to talk about that. We're going to try and move somewhat quickly through these notes because we do have a sample proposal from the esteemed Dr. Alton L. Gansky to look at, and so we want to take a quick look at that, and we want to make sure that we've got plenty of time for that. So there's that.
I just want to interrupt and say that it's really the trickle-down theory, because I get the boast of both of your best knowledge. So I'm super excited to start working on my proposal next month.
Is this the trumped-up trickle-down theory that we're going with?
And I thought we weren't going to make this political.
Oh, I'm sorry. It was the low-hanging fruit.
Right there.
It was right there. How can I not take that? All right.
Moving on.
Yes. So.
Well, but you do bring up something I need to comment on, and that is there are some groups like agents or editors that want certain things in their proposal, and it's not uniform from house to house, agent to agent. So if you're going to submit to a particular agent, you go to that website. They will often have sample proposals that they like to see, and you go through and you see what they did and what they like, and then you modify yours to that.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Molly.
All right. Well, no, I had a question, which is, do you to ask my question now, or were you going to finish your thought first, Aaron?
No, go for it. It's all you.
Do you recommend having an agent before you submit proposals? Isn't submitting for consideration what an agent would do on your behalf?
Yeah, if you can get an agent, let me rephrase that. If you can get a good agent, then you definitely want to do that. Sometimes getting an agent is more difficult than getting a publisher. A bad agent is worse than no agent. So it depends. There's only so many places you can submit over the transom, or if you remember what over the transom means, it's the old way they used to do it, where you push your manuscript over the little window over the interior door of these old buildings, office buildings, and it means unsolicited manuscript. You try to not to be an unsolicited manuscript. Some won't even look at them. It has to go through an agent. So what an agent will do is say, okay, this is good material. I need you to add this to your proposal, and let's skew it this way. We need to bolster this portion. Need you to fix a couple things, because they know what these different houses want. And you do that, and then they will take them. And the agent has the advantage of being able to pick up the phone and call the editor. They're all on first name basis. You say, okay, look, I got a winner here, and I think you're the best house in the country for this one. So you mind if I send that over? Well, now you're not on the slush pile anymore. It's requested material.
Nice.
The other advantage to that is you're not singing your own praises. As an editor, I've gotten, we talked about query letters last week, and when you're singing your own praises, it's kind of like, well, maybe it's something, maybe it's not. You've got an agent in your corner backing you. There's a lot of power in that. Pops, you already mentioned that they can help guide you in the process, help you to make minute adjustments to your proposals for particular houses. I always think of it as agents being the gatekeepers for the gatekeepers. They, like you say, Pops, they know the editors. They're able to contact them by phone, email, etc. They have more connections, a lot more connections than most writers do. And so they can match projects to houses on an easier, more efficiently than can a writer. So that's something else to consider.
So off topic, but just so you guys are aware, I'm totally going to start using you for your connections once NOLA's finished.
I would expect nothing less.
Okay.
So we're used to being used.
Well, that's how I got my start. A friend of mine made me go back and rework my first novel, which never went anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I rewrote it, and he asked his editor to look at it. Now, that's all he could do.
Wow.
He just says, look, I've asked him to send this to you as a favor to me. Will you look at it? Well, the editor said, yeah, I'll do that. And I ended up doing, I don't know, 4 or 5 books for that house because of that. Now, again, my friend didn't sell the thing. He couldn't do that. But he was able to at least get me off the slush pile.
Nice.
My first agent came from a connection that I made at a writer's conference, just a friend who had been recently contracted by this agent. And then he said, hey, you need to take a look at this guy's writing. And so she actually contacted me. And so that's another power of the connections and writers conferences and things of that nature. So again, like you say, no one person, no agent, no friend is going to sell your book for you. The thing that's going to sell your book for you is your proposal. It's going to be your manuscript. It's going to be your writing chops. I want to be clear about that. But that's an important thing to remember. The connections help, but it's still the power of the proposal that's going to sell it. And Pops, you were mentioning that the proposal is really kind of a digest of your ideas, and that it contains vital information about your project. Specifically marketing information, a biography, which we talked about last week, sample pages, and a synopsis, which we're going to take a deeper look at tonight, and a lot more. So to really kind of get a sense of this, you want to think like an editor or an agent. You want to imagine yourself in that role. Pops, why don't you take us to that place of being an editor or an agent?
Well, when I first started out and started doing proposals, what I tried to do was imagine myself sitting in a publishing house in the little cubicles that some of these people get. Some get big offices, but most of the time it's a cubicle of some sort. And in those days, you submitted a physical manuscript. Now it's all done electronically, so it's even easier. But I remember walking into one of my editor's offices, his cubicle, and it was from the floor up as high as his desk, 4 or 5 piles of manuscripts, and then another several piles on top of his desk. So I asked myself, well, how can I get my proposal noticed? How do I stand out from the rest? And I developed a little process of doing that, a little plan that helped out quite a bit. So you just have to understand these editors and these agents are just overwhelmed with material. We sometimes think we're the only ones writing in the world. We're not. There are a lot of people trying to get in to the writing. So you want to make it as easy on the editor or the agent, whoever you're sending the proposal to, you want to make it as easy on that reader as possible. You want them to like you. So I used to use the whitest paper I could get. I always used a little heavier paper so it felt meatier in the hand. I always put the important information up front. I used taglines, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I just envisioned them overwhelmed and tired and asking, how do I choose through all of this? So I came up with the fact you're going to need a saleable synopsis. Synopsis means to see together. You're going to need something that's going to combine everything. And it really gets the idea across. You're going to need a professional look. If it is a dirty looking manuscript or filled with typos, they don't care about a few typos, but if it's got a lot of typos, it means you didn't care enough to read through it. If it's hard to read, if you put it on pink paper, but people used to do that, it just puts them in a bad mood. If it's easy to read, if it's a professional presentation, if they can start at the beginning, you get their attention and they get all the information they need right up front, then that works out well. And what the editor will do is say, and then if you get a out of them, you're on your way.
And that can really come at any moment or any section of the proposal. You want it, like you say, Pops, to be as early as possible. So that may be from a tagline. And I think that's probably one reason why you put that in there. But it might be later on in the marketing section where they go, well, I see their marketing strategy, and that sounds like it's going to be able to sell. So the is the where it comes is not as relevant as getting it. The worst thing that happens is for them to go through your manuscript or your proposal rather and just say meh. You don't want the meh, you want the One of the other tricks that I like to think of is I like to think of it in after being an editor for a number of years with the Citron Review. It's important not to give an editor a reason to say no. Okay, you want to keep it clean, as clear as you can. Like you said, professional. Pops, you said professional. So avoid the typos. For me, the stock characters, the cliche story setup or description where you're just borrowing from everything else that everybody has ever written. If I feel like I'm looking at your project and it's not like everything else I've read, I'm going to be a lot more interested because you've got unique characters, unique story situations, a unique voice, those types of things. So you want to maximize the originality of your project, and we'll talk about more of that throughout this podcast, but the proposal is one way that you can really demonstrate your originality.
That's right, and they appreciate being presented with something they can make a snap decision on. And that's what you want, because it can take a long time to get this stuff turned around. And my thinking always was, if they're going to reject me, I want them to reject me right away. I don't want to wait 3 months to get rejected, because I want to, circulate this if I'm not doing, multi-proposals at a time. But if they're going to reject me, I want to know right away so I can make changes and go to the next stop. And so I upfront all the most important information. So let's talk a little bit about what's in a standard proposal. There'll be a cover letter. We talked a little bit about the inquiry letter last time. Actually, you guys did, because I was watching baseball. I had a headache. Yeah. I had a headache when I was watching the World Series. No, really, I did. It was bad. If you have an agent, your agent's going to write the cover letter. If they know the publisher wants it, sometimes it's just they just scratch a note on the front page of it. That's all they need, because they're all well connected. So you're going to have a cover letter. You're going to have a biography, and give some thought to this biography. You want to sell yourself as a writer, and you want to sell your project. You're the one person who can write this book, and no one's going to be able to write it the way you can write it.
That's right. Oh, you weren't talking to me right then, were you?
And no one's going to be able to do that like you're going to be able to do that. And it doesn't matter if you were a track and field star in high school, unless you're writing about track and field. It doesn't matter if you've won baking contests, if you're writing a supernatural suspense or a political thriller or something like that. Adjust your biography so it reflects what's going on in the book. You're going to have a story synopsis. I do 3 of them. I do a one-liner, then I do a 1 paragraph, and then I do the full synopsis, which is usually about 2 pages long. So a one-liner, that's just to get their attention. If they don't like it, they won't read the rest of it anyway. But if they like it enough to go into the 1 paragraph, that 1 paragraph one is supposed to send them to the one where they read the whole thing, and that's where I hope to hook them. Of course, you have to have your contact information. Now, some people are saying, well, duh. Yeah, well, duh, I've seen them without the contact information. Mm-hmm. So we sometimes forget the little things. You got to make sure you have the contact information. And if you have an agent, always put the agent's contact information on there. I do it in the header portion of the page, so it's on every page. Now, one of the reasons I started doing that is back in the days of physical manuscripts, those things would get dropped. The pages would get all shuffled. So I put it on every page so they didn't have to go hunting for stuff. You'll always want to offer to send the full manuscript. Now, if it's your first book, they will want you to know that the manuscript is already completed. Seldom will they buy on spec. They want to know that you can finish the manuscript. So you'll at least have that ready. Once you're into the business a little bit, I've sold a book on 2-paragraph synopsis once in an email. They know I can write the book, so they're not too worried about it. Then you're also going to have some sample pages. Those are 20 to 30 pages of what it is you're writing about. It's just actually taken from the book. I suggest they be the first 20 or 30 pages. Don't just try to show off the shiny chapters. Show them the beginning. They want to know how things start, how you introduce the characters. They need to fall in love with your characters or hate the bad guys, whatever it may be. So don't skip chapters. And then, of course, there needs to be, I think, as you said, Aaron, there needs to be the marketing information, which means you have to go to Amazon and look up, are there books of a similar plot? And it takes a little bit of work to get those things done. This is one reason I don't like doing proposals. I don't like going through all of that, but it needs to be done because they're not going to do it for you. It shows that you cared enough to do the research. And if they feel comfortable with what you present them, that there are 3 books like this. For example, I was working on a nonfiction book on the Scopes trial. I had to list all the books about the Scopes monkey trial that were out there and show that each of them, at least 20 years old or something, to let them understand it's time for a fresh approach or something. Same thing in novels. They need to know if you're writing military fiction, what other ones have touched on this particular topic, what makes you different. So, and then you probably need to talk about platform, which really shouldn't be part of the writing business for the writer, but it is these days. And
for new listeners, what is your definition in this instance of a platform and how is it established?
Well, what has changed over the years is publishers are expecting writers to do most of the marketing and most of the promotion. Now, there's always been some of that, but it's been a big complaint of mine, and I know some publishers don't like me saying it, but they're the ones that have a marketing department with people that have bachelor's and master's degrees in marketing, not me. So they're asking the amateur to do the job that sometimes their whole department can't do. And we're just not cut out for that. Some of us writers are writers because we're anything but marketers. But nonetheless, you're going to have to do that. So do you have a good social media presence? Do you have a decent blog going on? Do you travel the country speaking on a topic that's associated with your book? What do you have that will help them understand that you can do the radio interviews when they set them up for you, that you know what you're talking about and you already have a group of followers and endorsers and stuff like that. The more you have of that, the better off you are.
We're actually going to take a deeper look at platform and marketing next month, or next week rather, not next month. So I would recommend tuning into that, and we'll talk more about how to do the blog and how to, you know, speaking engagements where you can look for those types of things, and building your audience and readership and all those types of things. So we'll talk more about that next week.
Would you say
And
that episode is connected to this episode?
I would never say that.
Wasn't talking to
like a
you.
like a Lego,
Like a
maybe
Lego, maybe?
like a building block. Yeah, there might be
Hmm.
that connection there. Strange. So a couple things that the editor and agents are going to want to know. If we just look at a quick hit list here, they want to know what the story is about. They want to know what what the big picture is right off the bat. Don't be coy. Just be upfront. They're going to need to know a few things: the genre of the book, the audience. Be specific. The way I always explain this to my students is, because you say, "Who's the audience of this piece?" and they go, "Oh, 10th grade English students." And it's like, no, no, it's not. They didn't write this for you. Who would buy this book for him or herself? Not to give as a gift, but somebody walking into a Barnes and Noble or a Christian bookstore or whatever it is, and they come across this and they pick it up and they go, "Oh yeah, I'd like to read that." That's going to be your audience. Think of their gender, their age range, fans of this book or that book. Try and think in those terms. The length, specifically in words, pages are relative based on formatting, but give them the word count, the point of view, the status of the project. This is where you're going to say it's either complete or it's in progress. Pops, do you typically give them like a percentage, like 50% done, or do you just simply say in progress? How do you handle that?
First of all, point of view, we're talking about whether it's first person or third person. For those that may not be familiar with the term point of view. Usually what I do is I will tell them I can deliver the manuscript in 6 months or 4 months. That's really what they want to do, is plan which season the book is going to come out in. So I don't tell them 25% or 50%. I tell them when it's going to be done. So I'll let them know it's in progress, and I'll have full manuscript in 4 months, 6 months, whatever it might be.
3 days, 4 days, if you're in a hurry.
Yesterday.
So, yeah. Oh my
I'm
goodness.
writing a science fiction time warp novel. It was done 300 years ago.
I just stumbled upon it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Trent Reznor covering Hurt before Johnny Cash wrote it. Little time machine action.
Something
Anybody
like
know what I'm
that.
talking about? No? Okay.
No, but we're just going to pretend that we do. Good point, Aaron.
I feel like I have to explain that now. Okay, so Trent Reznor, Nine Inch Nails, wrote the song Hurt. Johnny Cash covered it. Trent Reznor liked Cash's version so much, he said, that's the original. Mine was the cover version. So, interesting.
Wow. Okay.
What is it? He covered the song before I wrote it, or whatever, however you think about it. Anyhow, moving on.
So proposals.
Yes, they want to know about you as a writer. We talked about the bio, the credits, if you got them, your author credits. What have you published? This doesn't necessarily have to be novels. If you've published short stories and poems and the like, any sort of publication credits that you have can speak to your ability to write. You want to include a bio with a photo. If you've got it, color is preferable, obviously. Your expertise, your background expertise, some connections that you have. I've been asked several times for a list of influencers, people I have that have their own market, so I can extend my market. I give this one person a book, and then they tell all of their fans, hey, this book is good. So they want to know about some of these connections that you have, people who might be able to endorse the book, big names. Social media, how many friends do you have on Facebook? They ask. How many followers do you have on Twitter? They ask. Speaking engagements, we talked about. Any media experience you have, such as radio, television, those types of things. They want to know about your writing style. Can they, do they market to that particular group? And if they're going to be able to market you as an author. So those are all things that they're looking for as well.
Nice.
Pops, you want to do selling the sizzle?
Yeah. That's the difference, I think, between a great proposal and a mediocre proposal, is those who write great proposals sell the sizzle. That's an old salesperson's line. You don't sell the steak, you sell the sizzle, because that's what people respond to. So in your proposal, you want to make clear what's at stake for the character. or something that the character cares about. What happens if the protagonist fails? That's always the two what ifs. What if this happens? What if my character fails? Who pays the price? Is it the end of the world, or does the romance fail? What happens if the protagonist fails? If you have some unforgettable characters that are unique, okay, that's part of the sizzle. You want to sell them on it. And that doesn't mean they have to be superheroes. In my book, Wounds, my protagonist is a reclusive theologian. He doesn't like to go outside. He doesn't like people. He's afraid all the time. He keeps his office dark. He's the opposite of a hero. But that's part of the story, because he gets pushed into the role of hero. And it's how it affects him and the things that go along with that. Is it a story that readers will care a lot about and not soon forget? That's sizzle. So put those kinds of things in. And I'm going to share with you very quickly some Al-isms. These are things I put in mine. And go to aarongansky.com and get the show notes. He'll post these show notes, and if you're a subscriber, you get them anyway, so you can see this list, because I'm going to run through them rather quickly here. And that is, I use a tagline. A tagline is what you hear in a movie. In a world where no one cares, there's one man who stands alone. Okay, tagline, and I would do that. I'd listen to trailers, movie trailers, and make notes, because these guys are experts at that kind of stuff, getting your attention. And when we get to showing the proposal here, I'll show you taglines. Pull quotes, we'll show those to you in a minute too. Pull quote is where I would, and I don't know if anyone else doing this, there may be, I just haven't seen it, but I would pull particular lines out of my work and put it in the middle of the proposal and set it apart. Sort of, like just a little taste of something. Formatting of the front matter of the proposal. The front matter is all this information we've been talking about. The back matter is the sample pages that you're going to send in. I always format mine the best you can be so it's very clear and memorable. So I do a little bit of formatting work on it. It doesn't have to be fancy or cutesy. But in fact, it's better if it's not cutesy. I put some factoids in, which we'll show you. When I do the full synopsis, I always do it in a 3-act structure, because editors know what that is. They're comfortable with it. Doesn't mean your book has to be in a 3-act structure, but it will help you get through it and the editor get through it. I always list, usually I list alternate titles, sometimes 6 or more, so they know that I'm thinking about that and I'm open to the fact that they're going to change the title anyway. Sample of endorsements. Now, that's if you've published before, you have other books out. People on Amazon have said some nice things. You've got some other endorsements and stuff like that. I always put that in the proposal too. And that works out. If it's your first book, you don't worry about that. Sample reviews from previous work. Again, if you're a new writer, you won't have those. Then another thing I do, I stole from the film industry, and that is in the proposal, anytime my character is mentioned, I used to use the first mention rule, but I got to where I just used it in the front matter. Anytime my characters are mentioned, I capitalize the whole name. That is, Bob is capital B, capital O, capital B, so that it stands out from the rest of the text. We are people. We're attracted to names and stuff. I found doing that makes my characters stand out. So I always capitalize those initially. They do that in the film industry in treatments or movies. So
nice.
Let me sum this portion up, and we can show that proposal then. How it works: you choose your primary pitch. This is the book you want to write, and you want to write it now, and then you include the standard material. Again, all of this is going to be on the show notes. Add a character list, like opening credits to the movie or the closing credits to a movie. A plot structure if necessary. For example, in my book, A Ship Possessed, it's a double helix. I have a story that takes place in the past and one in its current time, and they wrap around each other. Or if you're going to skip through history, as I did in my book, Vanished, I list that. Use teaser lines. Again, that's taglines. One of mine was, how far would you go to save a life? How far would you go to save 1,000 lives? The rest of it was, would you kill to save 1,000 people? Make it easy to read, no fancy fonts, not all in italics. Just remember they're used to reading books, so make it look like a book. Proper artwork and color is okay. Keep it organized. Things should be easy to find. Everything you should do, you should do to make the editor's job easier. I often use a little color in them. Not always. The one we're going to look at is all black and white. But if you do that, don't go overboard. Just use a little. I say think of it as women's makeup. The right amount makes the woman look good. Too much makes her look cheap. Hope I don't get letters. Send letters to Aaron Gansky.
Yeah, I'm getting letters on that one.
Yeah. Again, it's just if you overdo something, then it makes it look bad. Then you send it off and get started on your next one.
Excellent. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Let me see if I can.
What Aaron is pulling up here is a proposal I did a long time ago. I shortened the sample pages in the back, but I did this one a long time ago. This one never placed. I was working with someone else, and while we had interest, never placed it, and I had moved on to other things. So what you're going to see is an older proposal.
And is it showing now? Okay.
Well, I see it, but it's small on my side. Can you go to full page?
I am on full page. I am on full screen right now. You should be seeing exactly what I'm seeing. Let me double check here. Oh, is it doing the thing where it's... Oh,
Yeah.
well, now it is.
It's kind of
Right.
pixelating because of the
Because of
video
that.
feed.
But I should be able to do that. Let me see if there's another way. No, I think I just have to do it this way. Are you guys still able to see it okay? Or I can do like this where I zoom in a little bit. I don't know.
Yeah. Why don't you do that?
That's much better.
All right.
Okay, so notice, just go ahead and stop there. You notice at the top, it says the deep below, Alton Gansky, that's me, and then there's my agent, Dr. Chip McGregor. Don't go bugging him, okay?
Tell him
like
Al
to-
sent you.
I'd like to keep him as an agent. So go ahead and scroll down there. It says book proposals, so that right off the bat, they know what they're dealing with there.
We got Pops. This is in the header portion up here, correct?
Right.
As you mentioned. So that's going to appear on every page. We got a little title page here, book proposal.
Deep below, I call it a novel, so it doesn't get confused with anything else. And notice, although I have my contact information elsewhere, I also have it on the front page. That's just tradition.
Yeah.
The old days, you put your physical address, your mailing address. Now
I've
no one
always-
cares.
I've always put my agent information there as well.
Yeah, I've done that too, and that's certainly not bad. So here's the one sentence description. Captain Alan Reed is called back to duty to aid in the investigation of a sunken Russian sub that has come to life. The sub he sank in an accident 20 years before. That's the hook.
Bum bum bum.
Or I should have read it like a movie title. Captain Alan Reed is called back.
Do it.
One way. He sunk a Russian sub, and now the mob wants in. All right, enough of that.
Now,
So
I
you
have a
got
thing
your-
called metrics, and you can call it anything else, stats, whatever you want to call it. But this is just a quick summary of the book, and I do this for the editor. You can come by, and he can say, adult supernatural suspense military action adventure. Now, we don't do those. He rejects it, and I'm free to go to the next thing. Or he can say, man, we've been looking for one of those. And that's how it works. There is the book is going to be between 90 and 100,000 words. You measure book length in words, not in pages, because you change the font size, pages mean nothing. You change the font type, the page number, the page count changes. So it's always done in words. 90,000 to 100,000 is a decent size book. It's not huge, but it's not small either. Third person close point of view. That's what the POV stands for. Ensemble cast, which means I have several supporting protagonists. Then I also mentioned it's a standalone book, but it's capable of being part of a series.
Excellent.
Then we go to a little longer summary. And a Typhoon-class Soviet sub moves through the North Atlantic Ocean. It carries nuclear warheads, a threat to the United States and every free country. How does a submarine that has been on the bottom of the ocean since 1995 come back to life? Who guides it? What controls it? While some speculate that someone has found a way to enter the resurrect the sub, Alan Reed thinks something more sinister is behind it. Unfortunately, he's right.
Oh.
Good.
Okay, so now you see again, that's the hook. That's the him, the I'm trying to get out of them. But see, I don't solve it all right there. I go on to some other stuff because I want the editor to think about, well, where does this go? Well, they're going to have to keep reading to find out.
And then we've got a pulled quote here, and I'm assuming, Pops, that this section actually comes from the text itself because the style, the voice is different than the kind of the synopsis that you wrote previously. Is that a
That's
fair
correct.
assumption? Yeah, so you have it had not stirred for 20 years. It had not given itself to voice, had not allowed itself to hear. It lay motionless, 630 pounds of pressure compressing every square inch of its skin. So you've got a lot of personification here working. Unfortunately, you do have that semicolon, and man, it just really took me out of the story. Not, no. All right, sorry, inside joke.
Consider yourself slapped.
Yeah, inside joke, right. We love inside jokes. All right. And then we move on to the next page where you have the longer synopsis here, a couple paragraphs long, but I'm noticing here you've got in bold and all caps the character names as you mentioned earlier as well. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, Pops, I'm just gonna go ahead and read this. I know we have a lot of audio only listeners.
All right.
And I think just to be able to hear it is going to be positive because the synopsis is really a whole different animal. It's a whole different beast. So here's what you say. Rising from the sediment of the Barents Sea, a long sunken Soviet missile submarine turns west to complete its self-imposed mission, revenge. As it passes between Greenland and Iceland, it crosses a sonar tripwire on the ocean floor, alerting the U.S. Navy to its mysterious presence. In the mid-Atlantic, Captain Alan Reed, 3 weeks into retirement, is lowered by helicopter to America's state-of-the-art attack submarine, USS Texas. With him are Dr. Arnett Thomas, a Russian intelligence specialist, and Dr. Christopher Bergman, an expert in unmanned underwater vehicles, and a man with a secret. Reed informs Texas's skipper, Commander Alan Whitford, of a change in orders. His new mission is to find the mystery submarine. Sonar technicians have identified the sound signature as a Typhoon-class sub, the same Typhoon sub Reed collided with 20 years before. A cover-up kept the event from the public, but the accident still haunts Reed. And then I'm going to skip kind of this pulled quote here, though I like that you put it there, a nice big text, so it's very easily readable. 1995, Alan Reed is the executive officer of the USS Montgomery, a nuclear attack submarine. So you put right here the date so we know that we're back, we're moving backward in time. And so this is kind of, I understand that the synopsis, that the plot will do that as well. Alan Reed is the executive officer of USS Montgomery, a nuclear attack submarine. Montgomery has been tailing a Soviet Typhoon-class missile boat for the past 12 hours. The Typhoon had been in a dry dock for over a year. Montgomery's mission is to follow and detect changes made during the overhaul. When the captain, Dixon, retires from some sleep, Reed is left in charge. A sudden, unexplained loss of sonar allows the Typhoon to disappear from Montgomery's sensor. When it reappears, Reed discovers it has turned and it is on a collision course with the U.S. sub. Reed orders evasive action, but the two subs collide. Both suffer flooding and begin to sink. Though Captain Dixon has received a blow to the head, he returns to take command, but Dixon is dazed, incapable of making the proper decisions. Reed has no choice but to assume command. Backed by the chief of the boat, he relieves the skipper of duty. Aboard the Typhoon, the Soviet captain Mikhail Tupolev, struggling to bring his sub to the surface. Realizing he is sinking to the bottom, which is thankfully shallower than crush depth, Tupolev works to minimize the impact and save the crew. The Typhoon plunges into the depths while Montgomery manages to claw its way to the surface. For the sake of time, I'll go ahead and stop here because I think people are able to kind of get a sense here. You've got another pulled quote a little bit later on. Pops, let me just ask you real quick, as this synopsis continues for some time, do you, or did I miss, are these the sample pages?
No, not yet.
Okay. So do you include the resolution in your synopsis? Are you that thorough in your synopsis?
Yeah, when I can. But early on, I was really a intuitive writer, and I would occasionally have an editor ask me, well, how does it end? And I'd say, I don't know. I haven't lived it yet. Because sometimes I just didn't know. More and more, though, now I try to do a little more outlining, and I will have a solution a resolution in the proposal. And that's really the best way to go, especially if you're starting out, which is easier because you'll have already finished the book.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very much the same way. And so I often put in a resolution, and I've been lucky enough to have similar resolutions when I get to the end. Sometimes they take a bit of a turn and I have to update my proposal, but for the most part, I kind of know where I'm going. I just don't know how to get there. So, but I originally didn't include the endings, the resolutions in my proposals. And my first agent had to tell me, you got to kind of put those in there. It's like, I don't know what they are. So I guess I'll figure that out next. So you've got a feature here called Features and Benefits.
Right. And it's just a short list. It's a bullet list. In this particular case, there's 5 little bullets. The deep below is a story taken from contemporary headlines. So what I'm trying to do is sell the whole concept now. The deep below, notice I keep using the name. The title, The Deep Below, takes the reader on a modern-day odyssey into evolving computer technologies and deadly secretive world of submarine operations. The Deep Below explores the tactics, limitations, and next-generation weapons used in modern submarine warfare. The Deep Below follows the outworking of moral choices made by ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. So that's one of the first bullet lists, and I kept hammering away on the title there because I want to put it in their mind so they don't forget it.
And this is not a feature that I see in a lot of proposals, and so it kind of stands out on that merit alone, is that it's useful, and it's efficient in its communication. It's another selling point, and so I think it's another layer of professionalism that you add in here. I did want to call attention to the intended audience that you mentioned here. You've got 4 bullet points: adult readers who enjoy stories of adventure, intrigue, and technical sophistication; readers who enjoy stories with emotional, intellectual depth; readers seeking stories featuring strong, independent men and women; readers who honor the men and women serving in the armed forces of the United States. So it's very specific. I've often included in my intended audience readers of, or readers who enjoy books by, and I'll list some similar authors.
Right.
Is that something that you've done as well?
Yes, I've done that before.
So that way the publisher gets a sense of, hey, this guy's books are flying off the shelf, so this is kind of hot right now. Maybe this is something we can work with. Maybe this is something we can sell. So here you have a series marketability. And what is that for? Because there's a lot of people who, we know what a series is, but what do you mean by marketability?
Well, you're trying to answer the question, trying to convince them that what you're presenting to them will find a home and that it will be easy to market. There's already an audience out there. So in something like this, for example, I could list the number of people that have read Tom Clancy. There's another military writer, Kuntz, and so on, and you can mention those. In fact, and I mentioned it there, Tom Clancy and H.J. Riker, they write submarine stories. Or have written submarine stories, blend high-tech settings, Hunt for Red October, The Fifth Man, Silent Service. And so I do list some of those, which is what you were talking about.
Absolutely. And so there you're just kind of showing that though this is a standalone, it does have series potential as well.
Right.
Okay, excellent. And here's your biography, which I don't know if you updated this. I don't think you have, because you've written a lot more than these books, yeah?
I don't think I had them all listed. It's 24 novels, 8 nonfiction. So what's that? 32. Another 9. Yeah. So that's 41, 2 43, 44. And then if you count the co-writing things, it pushes it over 50. So I'm not sure that it's fully up to date.
You do mention your awards. You've been a finalist for this award. You've won that award. You've got.
I see one that's missing, so I know it's not fully up to date.
Yeah. You've got the Bachelor of Arts degree and Masters of Arts in Biblical Studies. I would imagine if this were more recent, you would also have listed that you were the director of the Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference for a number of years.
It was in there originally.
Okay. All right. So
I took it out.
And then here you've just got the list. And this is why you don't read your list of publications at the beginning of our podcast, because we're not that long. We don't have 2.5 hours. We just got the 1 hour. So but you can tell here that this is somebody who's well steeped in the industry, who's been around the industry for a number of years. You would be completely comfortable trusting this person to deliver a saleable manuscript. You have here pages 107. I'm guessing you don't have 100. You have 28 pages here, and so you've got roughly 20 pages of the sample pages.
No, actually, I had many more. I just cut them down for tonight.
Oh, okay.
So I just used the first chapter.
How many did you include, if you don't mind me asking?
I think in the final version, I think I used 50.
Okay. I feel like early in the podcast you said something like 20 to 50. Is that what you said?
You said 20 to 30.
20 to 30?
Of the sample pages, yeah, of the chapters. When you put the front matter together, my proposals usually run 40 to 50 pages. Okay.
And then, all right, but of those 40 to 50, 20 to 30 are sample pages.
That's right.
Gotcha.
And that's no magic number. If you get it done in less than that, that's fine, but you don't want it too short because it doesn't look like you have anything to say.
My proposals, typically I do on the shorter side. I usually have about 20 pages of sample pages. I usually do about 20. Well,
let me tell you what really goes on with the editors on this, because I'm afraid that people are going to get this idea that what the editors do is they pick each one of these up and they read it from first page to last page. They don't. What they do is they look for something that's going to interest them. That's why I front load the key information, because they will look at the front page. Do I know this guy? What is this book about? How long is it? Did we publish this kind of stuff? And then they will skip the rest of it and read the first couple pages of the sample. If they like that, then they go back and then they start working their way through it. But I know she's an agent now, but she was an acquisitions editor, and she didn't even read the front matter. She just skipped down to the sample chapters, and if you could not get her in 2 pages, she was done. She didn't care what the front matter said because you didn't have the writing chops.
That is remarkable. As an editor, I've done very similar things where I will typically read until I'm not interested. And if that's, if I finish your book, great. Or if I get to the point where I'm like, you know what, I don't think I'm ever not going to be interested in this. That's a really good place to be. But I'll usually know within a few pages whether or not I'm interested. I always read the sample pages because that's the most important aspect for me. Then I'll go back and say, okay, what does the rest of this novel look like? I want to look at the synopsis at that point. Writing's good. Let me see the synopsis. And so I'll take a look at the synopsis, and then if I'm thinking, okay, this is going in the right direction, I see where this is headed, I like it. Do they have a platform? Is this something that we can sell? Do they have a market, et cetera? Then I'll look at some of that stuff. But I care less about that, even though it's very necessary to have. I do care much more about the sample pages. So, Molly, do we have anything else before we go to comments from the chat room, Pops? Any last minute comments?
No, we just covered a lot of material, so do make sure that you get the show notes.
Okay. And Molly, do we have any comments or questions?
We don't. Dave Fessenden was in the chat room at the beginning, but then he had to leave. So the chat room was a little empty. The only person in the chat room tonight was Jacqueline Patterson.
Hi, Jacqueline.
So she says, happy birthday, Aaron.
Thank you.
And then we were just talking about our different writing and getting caught up with each other. She says, Steve Lobby told her about some hilarious proposals he received, including an autobiography about a sentient worm and a love story where the hero rescues his lady from radioactive frogs.
Well,
that could happen.
That's
sure. Okay.
The problem with it is it's a little overdone. We get to see that so often.
Yeah, absolutely. And other than that, it was just kind of chit chat between the two of us. She said she loved Wounds. She read the entire book in a day.
Huh.
And
you know how long it took me to write that?
How long? Well, if it helps, I haven't gotten past the first chapter. So, your effort
that's really encouraging.
Well, I don't know what you want. There's just no pleasing you tonight. So
I can't stomach the first chapter.
That's That's all, Aaron. I'm done.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, it is election night. I think that's probably why our viewership's a little bit down. We do appreciate Dave popping in, and Jacqueline, absolutely enjoyed having you along for the ride. Next week, same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be here talking proposals, specifically marketing and platform, one of the most challenging aspects for any writer. So be sure to tune in for some good advice on that. Until then, don't forget to ask the author. You can always find us at altongansky.com, franklymydearmojo.com, and aarongansky.com. I almost forgot that one. And we thank you all so much for listening. And until next week, good writing.